You think that the price of the highest end iPhone could go up significantly and that consumers are willing to pay? And, Tim Cook told me when I spoke to him ahead of the earnings call, he's not worried about the price of that, $999 iPhone. Clearly, it's selling. But how much more are people going to be willing to pay, and how much can Apple continue to rely on these higher ASPs, or average selling prices, for the phone in a particular quarter?
Well, they can rely on that because, as Tim Cook said, this is the phone market's the best consumer market in the history of the world. And so I think that there's a big base that they can tap into, but it's a smaller group that wants that. But I'm going to put some perspective around the opportunity in the high end, is that they have seen better sales in their iPhone 10 than they typically see. And obviously the iPhone 10 is more expensive than a normal phone. So I think that the proof is in the results for the last 2 quarters is consumers are valuing their phones at greater levels, and they're willing to pay up for that. And the reason why this is going to continue, and they're going to get more options to pay up, because high probability, Bloomberg has been reporting a lot about this, about the new family of phones that is going to be out in the fall. One of them is probably going to be 25% bigger and could be a $1,400 ASP on it. Now that's compared to the $1,200, kind of the high-end ASP for the iPhone 10 now. So my point is that they're going to have more options, even more options to spend up, and I think that we've learned that this, in fact, will gain traction.
We've talked about Xiaomi going public earlier. How much of a threat is Xiaomi to Apple?
That's one of the reasons why this iPhone business probably won't grow above 5% over the long haul. Is that that Xiaomi market is the 500 million units that is at the flip phone market. Getting those to convert over is going to be very difficult for Apple to win those, given those high ASPs that you're talking about. So it's a big threat. It's why the iPhone business will not grow at probably 10-15% in the future. But I think that it will. So that's, I think, the competitive threat there.
We were speaking with Chamath Palihapitiya earlier, who talked about Apple's sort of innovation problem and said it's unclear what the next lily pad is for Apple. You mentioned earlier the trifecta: iPhone, services, share buyback. Is services that next lily pad, or are you looking for something more?
We are, and we have a history of getting some of these right and some of them wrong. But it's the one other factor here in the story is that there is optionality value on other things that they could get into. And probably the 2 most obvious is something around wearables. They've made recent acquisitions around glasses. This would be one around Tim Cook's favorite themes is augmented reality, and kind of taking that to a level where its consumer adds a lot of value in consumers. So I think that's a big opportunity for the company. And then second, there's the piece around content, which plays into services. You're going to hear more from Apple over the next few years on that front. And then the last real wild card is around the self-driving autonomous cars, autonomous vehicles. They have a project called PALE, the Palo Alto to Infinite Loop. And so there you could hear more about what they're doing in self-driving cars.
So we're all watching this potential trade war with China, and Apple could, in particular, be harder hit than other technology companies, given how many smartphones it manufactures in China. What is the worst case scenario for how Apple and the smartphone market at large could be hit if this trade war really does explode?
Well, you have a market. The big issue here is just obviously with the price that consumers are going to pay. And so it's still unclear about if this war actually plays out and what the impact would be. But here's the worst case scenario is that, let's say that there's a 20% tariff or 30% tariff that goes on iPhones, and instead of being an average selling price is $730 like it was in the last quarter, that goes up to $830 or $900. That's going to diminish their market share, and that could take the iPhone from being 3% growth last quarter to down 5%. I mean, you can build some pretty dangerous scenarios where people just simply can't afford. It's important to note that $200 is a lot of money for most people, and I think that can have a negative impact on the iPhone business.